liebe Teilnehmer und Teilnehmerinnen dieses Webinars, liebe Games-Enthusiasten, wie immer, leider immer noch an den Bildschirmen, aber bei Webinaren nicht so ungewöhnlich. Tatsächlich feiern wir heute einen ganz kleinen Meilenstein mit unserem Mediennetzwerk. Hallo zusammen. Das 10. Webinar des Mediennetzwerk NRW. Man glaubt es kaum, zu dem ich euch ganz herzlich willkommen heiße. Schön, dass ihr da seid, schön, dass ihr einer nach dem anderen eintrudelt. Ich sehe ein paar Hallos, ein paar Moins, Hallöchen, jeder wie er mag. Mein Name ist Sandra Winterberg, für diejenigen, die mich noch nicht kennen, die vielleicht zum ersten Mal bei diesem Webinar sind, die jetzt hier teilnehmen. Ich darf das Mediennetzwerk NRW leiten und zusammen mit meinen Kolleginnen und Kollegen hoffentlich ganz viele wunderbare Angebote, Maßnahmen, Events für euch machen und durchführen. Und dazu gehört unter anderem auch das Webinar, das wir heute abhalten. Und heute mit dem Thema Game Discovery and Your Game Hook. Und ich freue mich sehr, dass wir hier dazu einen ganz besonderen Experten gewinnen konnten, der uns tatsächlich aus Kalifornien zugeschaltet ist. Und um nicht unhöflich zu sein und weil wir ja in einer sehr internationalen Branche tätig sind, würde ich jetzt einfach mal, soweit mir das möglich ist, auf Englisch fortfahren. So again, I'm very happy to welcome him today and to introduce to you our special guest, Simon Carless. Hello, Simon.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going fine here. How is it with you? You're in California, is correct?
Yeah, I'm British originally, but I've lived in California for a few years now. So yeah, it's nice here. It's just the day is just starting out, and yeah, looking forward to doing this presentation.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again. It's a pleasure to have you here on the screen, at least. Well, most of the participants will certainly know you from your, numerous and long-standing engagements in the games industry, and I'm sure maybe you will say a few more words regarding your experience and your history later on in the webinar. And I haven't had the pleasure to meet you in person yet, although you have been to the Gamescom in Cologne, is that correct?
Yeah, because in a previous role, I was helping to oversee Game Developers Conference, and we ran GDC Europe at Gamescom for many years. So I often was going to Cologne, sampling the delightful beer and hanging out at the show. So yeah, it's actually really good, that Germany's become such a center of the European games trade with Gamescom. That was not, that's been developing over the past few years. So yeah, it's been really nice to go there, and I think you can learn a lot from in-person events that you can't from virtual, although right now virtual is what we've got. So I'm very happy to be helping you out with that.
Yeah, I agree. It would be lovely if we could meet in person again, or have the best of both sides, the digital world and the analog world. So what do you think, off the record, the trade fairs, the market, the big expos and conference, will they change? Will they be hybrid in the future?
Yeah, I think my former colleagues at GDC are very much piloting. I think they've decided, and I know Gamescom has decided to do an actual hybrid model this year. I think GDC is actually doing a virtual only model, but I think in the future I think there will be more of a move towards both. And obviously with Game Developers Conference, they would always record everything and make it available on the GDC Vault anyway. So I think that will probably still happen, but I'm guessing there will also be a move towards being able to simultaneously watch or interact or do more business meetings. And I think it's going to be positive because there's many excellent game developers who aren't able to come to physical events, either because they're somewhere else in the world or their financial they don't have enough cash to do it just yet. So I think if you can really hybridize that, you'll actually get to a much better state.
Yeah, a number of reasons for that. Anyway, you're cordially invited. If you come to Germany, come to our booth. We are doing the one for North Rhine-Westphalia in the business area, either this year, next year, or in the future. But again, most of our participants will probably know you, but to know you a little bit better, maybe to find something out about your personality, we'll have a quick and Q&A session with you. You and probably the participants know the little game A, B, or next. So I say a pair of words and you decide very quickly, and then you say maybe cats or dogs, you say dogs. And if you really can't decide, you just say next. And we'll try to do that as quick as possible and get a little impression from you. So we try that. We game on with the first question. Is it get up or snooze?
Snooze.
London or San Francisco?
Oh no, because I came from London and I live near San Francisco, so that one's difficult. London, I like London.
Okay. According to that, BBC or PBS?
Oh, BBC.
There you go. This is difficult. Sleeping or gaming?
Gaming, yeah.
Another difficult one is sports or esports?
Sports, actually. I don't mind esports, but I like sports more.
I see. What do we have? We have reading or listening?
Reading, big reading fan.
Good. Breakfast time, is it tea time or coffee break?
Next, because I don't like either of them.
Here we go. iOS or Android? You can't say next on that.
Oh, iOS. Yeah, I'm an Apple person.
Here we go. Regarding gaming, PC or console?
Console. I think a lot of the most innovative games on PC, but for my personal ease of use, I tend to play console.
Well, how about Xbox or PlayStation?
Oh, I mean, I use my Xbox more than my PlayStation, so I guess Xbox.
Okay. Nintendo Switch or mobile?
Nintendo Switch.
There you go. What else do we have? We have keyboard and mouse or controller?
Controller for me, yeah.
Good. Steam or Epic?
Steam, just because they have the market share right now.
Okay, here we go. Is it rather buy or rather subscription?
Buy.
There we go. And when you bought, indie or AAA?
I'm an indie person. I used to help run the Independent Games Festival, so that's my thing.
An easy question, okay. Adventure or RPG?
Probably adventure.
Okay. Shooter or fighting game?
Fighting game, although I'm not good at them, but I'm a good button masher, so.
Is it more platform or more simulation?
Platform.
Okay. So how about stream or let's play?
Oh, I like let's plays. I think they're pretty entertaining, yeah.
Oh, yeah, interesting. Okay. Are you a single player or multiplayer?
I'm a single player, actually, person. I enjoy that a lot more.
Okay. What do we have here? Co-op or versus?
Oh, co-op, definitely.
Here we go. That's a little philosophical. Online or offline?
Online.
Oh, good. Conference or festival?
Festival.
GDC or E3?
I used to run GDC, so GDC, definitely GDC.
There you go. Okay, this could be GDR and BRD. PAX East or PAX West?
Oh, yeah, PAX West is the original, and actually that's the one that I've been to a lot more, so yeah.
Okay, like that. Now, please be careful what you say. London Pocket Gamers or Gamescom?
Gamescom, I definitely think, actually.
There we go. On site or online?
Next, they're both good.
Okay. We have a couple of more. Don't worry, we'll not spend all day with this. Podcast or Clubhouse?
Next, podcast probably actually, but I've resisted attempts to get on Clubhouse so far, but maybe.
I see. Newsletter or blog?
Newsletter, big fan of newsletters.
Okay, there you go. Strong launch or long-term sales?
Both. So I guess that's the next.
That's next, yeah. Design or marketing?
I think design. Yeah.
Passion or knowledge?
I mean, I guess I'm a knowledge person, but I try and bring passion to it as well. But knowledge is probably
Yeah, we don't have both. Okay. Praise or success?
That's a good one. I guess success.
Okay, here come last but not least, fame or wealth?
I mean, I guess wealth, because fame is pretty much a double-edged sword, and wealth, if you can be low profile about it, is probably better.
I see. Okay, this was the last question. Thank you very much, dear Simon. And it's also well, it's not perfect, but it is a transition maybe to the content of your webinar or our webinar. Ideally, you know, your own game will bring you both fame and fortune. Obviously, that's a nice goal. And to achieve this and maybe increase the visibility, which is certainly important to have both of it, our participants can certainly learn something from you. I'm very optimistic about that. So, but before we start, I'm sorry about that, but we have briefly some organizational aspects. Dear participants, you're very welcome to send questions to Simon. We have some very nice colleagues in the background who will take care of any question and make them heard. If the picture or sound transmission is not the best, I do apologize in advance. As you know, the whole world is online. There is sometimes something going in between us, but please write us in the chat so my colleague can try to fix it if it's in our hands. I will leave you in a couple of seconds, dear Simon, and I will come back at the end of the presentation to have a couple of more words with you and to say something. And now I would say, dear Simon, I'm excited, I'm interested in to see what you have to tell us, what tips and hints you have. And I just say the virtual stage is yours. Have fun.
Thank you. Cool. So yeah, so I think firstly, before I get started with my presentation, we wanted to put up a little survey. So I just wanted to see kind of what area of business your game company most often works in. I can only really pick one, unfortunately. But if you know, if you can pick what most obviously applies to you, then it'd be good both to see what other people in the chat are actually working on, but also because I might try and tailor my presentation a little bit to the kind of stuff you say, because obviously I'm mainly concentrating on PC and console, but I do have some stuff to say about other formats, which is always interesting. So yeah, thank you. Already 29 of you have filled that out. So I guess we'll wait a little bit more to see if we can get a little closer to 100%, and then we'll show that. But yeah, always interested to know. The nice thing about the games industry is there's a significantly diverse population of folks working in it. So yeah, there's all kinds of approaches to this, basically. Cool. Yeah, we got to like 40 respondents, pretty good. So maybe we can show the results here in a second. But yeah, it's an interesting problem. I think the problem of markets, and that's something I'm going to talk about in my speech, actually. Just how tricky it is for certain markets, and some markets I think are a little bit easier than others. So great. So let me go ahead and screen share from here. Open browser. Okay, showing my screen. So let me get started here. And as was mentioned, you can do questions at any time in text, and they will be shown to me at the end, and I'll answer them one by one. So basically, yeah. This talk is called Perfecting Your Game Hook and the 10 Commandments of Discoverability. And as for who I am, you know, I am a former game developer. I used to work in the industry in the UK in the 90s, and actually in the US for a while on games for the original PlayStation and PC as a designer. But more recently, for the last 15 years or so, I was working at the GDC parent company, and I've variously overseen the Independent Games Festival, GDC, also Gamesexperte.com and Game Developer magazine. If anyone remembers that, I used to run the magazine as well. And then more recently, I was the original investor, and I continue to advise the indie game publisher No More Robots, who are the folks who publish games like Descenders and Yes, Your Grace and Hypnospace Outlaw. They're run by a guy called Mike Rose, and they've been doing quite well in the space, and I'm sort of lurking behind the scenes on those. And last year, I I launched GameDiscoverCo, which has a pretty popular newsletter now, and I consult with a number of publishers and devs in the space on discovery and marketing, but really what I call discovery, which is sort of like marketing plus a bunch of things. So let's start with a quote here. This is not me, although Chris and I are both bald guys with glasses. This is Xbox's head of their independent developer program, Chris Charla, and he voices the central point of this talk, which is you sort of have to engineer ways for people to find out about your game. Otherwise you may have issues, and you can't really, in my opinion, buy discoverability with money, at least not easily. You can buy marketing with money, but marketing doesn't necessarily translate to discoverability. And by discoverability, I mean people finding your game, enjoying it, recommending it to other people. So this is all really about how do people really find your game. The reason this is getting more important, as I'm sure a lot of you have noticed, is at least on Steam, there's 200 to 250 games released every week. So how do you really stand out? And I think one point I'd like to make is an incorrect way of thinking about this is that, I'll make a game that I'm personally invested in, and then I'll get someone else to worry about how people find out about it. And I think that's sort of a temptation. So maybe I'll make this game that I've always wanted to make, and then I'll let the publisher worry about how people find out about it, or I'll hire a marketing firm or use my marketing staff, and when I'm nearly done, and that's done. I think the correct way to think about this is a really conscious focus on how people find your game from the very beginning. And I think even if you have a publisher or you have partners, you need to think about how to stand out from even before you think of your central idea all the way up to launch. So I think it's important for people to always think like you're solely responsible for people finding out about your game, even if you're not, because otherwise I think that you will mentally divest that concept, and that may be a problem later. So Ryan Clark, who's a Canadian dev who made a game called Crypt of the Necrodancer that you might know, which has a really good hook, I think. It's a rhythm roguelike. Has done a bunch of good articles and videos about the hook concept. If you go to the Brace Yourself Games YouTube and you look for his videos about hook, I would highly recommend checking them out. There's a couple of them. And I really like this quote. In music, a hook is a short riff or melody or phrase that really grabs the listener and gets stuck in their head. In games, a hook is similar, but often takes effect before the game is even played. I think this is really important. And the fact that you want people to get your game stuck in their head somehow is quite an abstract concept, but you do really need to be thinking about that. And as I said, also takes effect before the game is even played. You probably concentrate a lot on how your games play. That is really important, especially after the game is released. But ultimately, a lot of people will make buying decisions on your game without playing them. So I think, focusing on how it looks and how it appears is one of the most important parts of hook. So let's start here with hook. I think. How do viewers feel after 5 to 10 seconds? How does the game grab you if you're just looking at a brief video or GIF of it? Then how can you maximize that appeal? Don't forget, a lot of your game's appeal is not about how it plays, it's about what it communicates. And most people will be attracted by a trailer or a snippet or watching a few seconds of someone playing on YouTube. So, like visual readability is really important. And so I've tried to work out some of the visual ways that you can stand out. One thing I think which is kind of a extrapolation of visual hook is, does this game look deep? Is it a game I want to spend $20 or $25 on, or 20 euros? Does it look like I can play it for a long time? Does it look complex? Does it look rewarding? These are all things that people will draw conclusions from just looking maybe at screenshots or maybe at video. So it's really a value judgment, but I do think that depth is increasingly important nowadays when there's so many games coming out. People want to feel like they're going to get their money's worth. Standout art direction. I think this one's difficult to define or get right. And sometimes when I think of this, I think of maybe outstanding pixel art, like, or really good graphical effects. But, you know, does it grab you visually is very important. There's a lot of games that play very well, but look quite vanilla, quite normal. And that's not always the best when you're trying to kind of get people to be excited by the game. Does the game feel visceral or juicy? These are kind of both slightly exotic words. Let me explain what I mean. For the juice comment, there's actually a video, a talk that's been done called Juice It or Lose It that you can find, I think, on YouTube. And a few comments about juicing games. And what I mean by juice is, have you got really good kind of bending, warping, like physical effects that make things feel very visceral? This is true even in cartoony games. You know, you can have cartoony games where the character warps around and there's a really nice effect when it hits an enemy or that type of stuff. It sort of feels more kind of substantive. And obviously with realistic games, that's true as well. Games that have destruction in them that feel very real or kind of exciting. So I think this is different from art direction, but it's more about kind of, yeah, does the game feel like you want to play it? And then alternative setting, you know, there's a lot of fantasy and medieval and dystopian stuff out there, and that's fine. And actually, later on, I suggest make your game similar to others. So I don't think there's anything wrong with having a fantasy or medieval or dystopian game, but I think it is worth thinking about alternative settings. And I think, you know, a good example recently is Gangster. You know, I think there hasn't been enough kind of mafia gangster games recently, and I actually think that would be a unique way to stand out. There's a game called Empire of Sin that came out recently that's done okay, but I do think its gangster hook really helped it break through. Next, what makes for a great game hook? Can you describe the game's hook in one short sentence or paragraph? You know, though most people would just look at your game and decide whether they like it, this is also a good thought experiment. I think, you know, one good example from my friends at No More Robots output, their game Not Tonight is described as a post-Brexit dystopian bouncer simulator. And that's a little bit out there, but I still think it's kind of interesting. So, you know, so you're simulating kicking people in and out of pubs and clubs. So, you know, it sounds a little alternative. So I think it is a good idea to try and distill your game down to a sentence or a paragraph and work it out from there. Talking about text elements that matter for hook. I think genre mashups are pretty good. Yeah, I think the concept of X meets Y can be a strong angle for a text description. People like twists on existing genres. Having procedural or some kind of large-scale systemic systems in the game also helps hook folks. Ideally, they can be replayable or different every time. I think that's one thing that gets people excited. They know that it's different every time, anything could happen. I think that's a great angle for modern titles. You know, if you don't feel like you have procedural, or if you want to do it differently, emphasizing a range of modes, I think is very helpful. You know, again, people feel like they want to feel like they have lots to do, and often I think when people buy games, they fear they'll be finished after 30 minutes. So if you really can make it feel like there's a lot to do, then that's really good. Finally, I think gameplay-centric language and talking about what you'll do in the game in kind of positive, aspirational, gameplay-centric ways is important. I think when you're kind of a little bit in love with your game and you're tempted to explain your game in a much more kind of story-centric way, but I would not recommend doing that. I think stories are great, but it doesn't seem to work that well for discovery purposes stories. I think what happens is if your story is great, then people after they play it will talk about it and you'll get great word of mouth, and that'll be wonderful. But I think beforehand, you know, having the whole hook around your game that it's got a great story is definitely you can tell people that, but you can't show people that. So I think it's a better idea to concentrate on some of the things that I've been talking about here. In terms of perfecting your hook, I think, from very early on, you can be talking to people about whether the concept you're pursuing on a game is a good one. You can even look at multiple concepts. I think, the idea that you can be looking at 3 or 4 different types of game for your next title and actually bounce each one of them off external friends or developers and sort of say, has this really got some bite to it? I think that's actively a good idea, and I think more people should do that. You can also look at data. I have some data sources later on in this talk. Sometimes difficult to really make sense of this data, but you can try and work out, are you moving into an area that is fertile? Are you moving into an area which has a lot of stiff competition? Or are you trying to make a game in an area where there's a bit more blue ocean? And I also think you can A/B test. You can show people, even potentially publicly, what you're thinking about doing and see what they react to. Some devs have definitely been doing this recently. Philomena Schwab's company, out of Austria, who are doing a game called The Wandering Village. And for The Wandering Village, they've showed concept art of that game before they even started coding it, before even the Kickstarter, which also didn't have anything playable. So they were trying to get a sense of how excited people were. And I think, that's a good idea. Also, do it earlier than you think. I think, you can do all this before you settle on an idea. I know probably you're actively working on projects now, but for your next idea, you can definitely think about this very early. And even if you can't, you can retrofit a bunch of this thinking into the hook of the game that you're working on right now. But, as I said, I think hook is actually very important. You should think of your game's hook as a thing that's independent from its marketing in some ways, and really, really try to understand what your game's hook is. You can also say, well, my game doesn't need a hook. It's great. What are you talking about? Which is quite possible, and I may agree. But I think only under certain circumstances would I agree with this. One of those is, if your game is in an incredibly specific subgenre like colony simulator, then you've differentiated yourself without having a hook. There are less of those being put out in any given month, and people are watching out for them. So maybe that's just your hook. If you're making a game for a subscription service specifically, then you won't have to worry so much about hook. If you're making a game specifically for Apple Arcade, for example, people will just come across it and you'll get paid anyhow. And, maybe subscription services are going to be important in the future. And so in that case, you can make something wonderful and creative that isn't obsessed about hook, and that's good. The only game in town, I think, if you really are the only game of this type, I guess this is like an even more niche version of the genre thing, then maybe you don't need a hook. A good example is, my friends at No More Robots released Descenders, which is a 3D mountain biking game. And at the time it came out, it was the only 3D mountain biking game out there, really, on PC and console. So you can argue the hook is simply that it's the only 3D mountain biking game. But obviously, there are some things where this won't work for. If you're the only 3D clown simulator, I don't know that's that's a hook as such. And then another one you can use if you're popular enough is simply, if players already love you, maybe you don't need a hook. The guys at Supergiant just came out with Hades, which is great, and you can argue whether that game has a hook or not. I think it probably does, but already people were excited for that game just because it was Supergiant. So that's definitely something you can do, but you do need to have a built-in audience, and probably a significant built-in audience for that to work. And just a bonus here for anyone who responded to the survey and said that they were on mobile. This is not really necessarily my focus, but I have some comments on it, and I think those comments are really that I think paid acquisition is way more important for most free-to-play. Maybe not the hyper-casual free stuff, but it means that you need to have games that monetize very well. You need to be very sharply monetized, and that's what most of the big guys do, and then they buy out the ads. So really, it seems like the most important thing for hook on mobile is often just, do you monetize really well? And if you do, you can spend more money profitably buying more players. And that's just kind of how it's tending to work right now. But I do think that, the hyper casual folks, which are the free games, which I think do have pretty good hooks, actually give interesting game design hints. And sometimes I'm surprised that more PC and console game developers don't look at what's hot in hyper casual. Like right now, or recently, I think like 3D wood carving games have been very hot on hyper casual, and I'm kind of like, maybe someone should make a 3D wood carving game for PC and console. But I don't know that's a good idea, but I just sort of interested. I think hyper casual can give you some interesting game design hints about hook, because some of those hyper casual games do need to be very hooky. And then just like premium mobile is kind of marginal. It's difficult because you can't charge, when I say premium, I mean one-off, pay $7 for this game or pay $5 for this game. And I think you can do okay there, but I've had some kind of public numbers in my newsletter. It's difficult, obviously, when you're selling at $6, and most people play free-to-play games to make a lot of money there. So maybe you can convert your PC and console game there, but I don't think centering around premium mobile is necessarily a good idea, particularly because it's difficult to get a good hook there when you're competing against the hyper-casual folks. And in general, I think mobile is difficult without a backer. Oops, sorry. So next part of my talk is really talking about game discoverability and hook as a part of what I see as game discoverability as a whole. And as you can see here, I'm sort of saying that your hook, as I've just described it, is kind of 55% of why people like your game. But I've also tried, and as I'm very hook centric, I think many other people would say, surely these other things are more important. Surely marketing and these things I'm saying below are more important. But this is certainly how I see it. So you're welcome to mess with the percentages here, but it's just my view. But I want to talk about these other things in a little bit of detail. And I think this first one, story beats, which I'm saying is 15% of kind of why people get excited about and buy your game, this is really about inflection points as you're announcing and publicizing your game. So, and I think there should be 3 or 4 of these. So for example, announce with a gameplay trailer is one of these story beats, and then be in the spring festival, or Next Fest as it's called now, would be another. But I think it's good to build your discovery story around a few big elements. So you want to think, I think, what are the 3 really big things I'm going to talk about before this game is released, and the 3 really big things I'm going to talk about actually after the game is released. Then I think nurture, this is more like the day-to-day, and I think many of you may have spotted, I think you need to develop fans that you interact with a bunch and carry through the process of making the game. I think a great place to start with that is via a Discord. If you have a dedicated Discord for your developer or your game where you can chat fans. But you can also use blogs, Steam page, and social media. And the point here is you want to keep trickling interesting information and really nurture these fans and interact with them, because these are the people who will give you your first 50 to 100 great Steam reviews to take you on your path to success. And I think, the previous concepts of maybe having, so shall we say, more controlled marketing, where you don't necessarily say that much, but you just have big beats only. I don't think that's necessarily how a lot of games are successful nowadays. More games as a service games, that they really do interact with their fans a lot, and that's how you build up trust. And so I think that's important. Finally, when it comes to the game's launch, you need to have all the tools in your arsenal firing at the same time. So streamer outreach is super important, press outreach with embargoes, big social media, Discord push. Fortunes of games can change very quickly before at launch, especially if streamers pick them up. I think streamers are the big wild card there if you have a streamer-friendly game. So this is definitely important, and I've definitely seen games have very different trajectories based on what happened in the couple of weeks before launch. But I would say that's not always specifically due to marketing or not. It's often due to the nature of their game. Okay, moving into the second part of this talk, here's another quote I wanted to highlight from Ben Wasser from Ublitz. And which is a farming pet simulator, which is shown on the left here. And I have to admit, I have changed the word here. It did say marketing, but I changed it to discoverability because I consider what Ben is saying a little bit beyond what you would say conventional marketing. And so he says marketing or discoverability is considering what's appealing, integrating that into your product and demonstrating that appeal. I think that's a really good holistic way to think about it. And what he's saying is, in the case of Ooblets, they really did think about what's appealing and put it in their game and then use that as the basis for the marketing. And I think that's, and the community. And I think that's a really good holistic way to look at it. And I think more developers should be looking at this stuff a little more holistically. So there's really a lot to talk about when it comes to game discovery and marketing. I could probably fill 20 or 40 hours, but we have to focus on something. So the second part of this talk looks at particular learnings that I think may not be obvious, but absolutely think you should follow if you want people to actually find your game. The first one of these, which I mentioned briefly already, is that your true fans are your launch boost. And this is actually a gentleman called Kevin Kelly, who famously wrote an article back in 2008 suggesting if you could get $100 each from your 1,000 true fans every year, you can make a great living. We can't charge $100 for our games, probably, but we can try to gather and interact with our fans during development, show them what we're working on and get them excited. And then you'll definitely have a head start on the algorithm because you'll get great reviews from those already bought in before you can even get others playing it. And I think Discord is a great way to marshal the troops there and unleash them all at the same time. If you can get to very positive reviews on Steam from just those folks alone, which is going to be 50 reviews, then you'll be in great shape. Secondly, I've been trying to work out a metric that accurately predicts if your game is tracking as you would like before it's released, because that's definitely part of GameDiscoverCo's mission. Or if you can even tell after you announce the game if you have traction. And there's one thing that I found that seems most reliable, and this is Steam Daily Organic Wishlist Additions. And what I'm talking about here is I think a lot of people are focused on their Steam wishlist numbers nowadays, obviously, because it's a good indication of interest. But I was reading somewhere, someone said recently, like immediately a statistic ends up becoming focused upon, it starts to lose meaning as a statistic because people will start trying to game it. And I don't think that's completely true for Steam wishlist, but I think that's starting to happen a little bit because people are starting to find ways to really juice their wish lists in ways that don't always relate to natural interest in the game. Like if you can be in a lot of Steam pre-release features for like virtual festivals and stuff, then that's great and it increases your wish list. But I don't believe that those wish lists are quite the same quality as the wish list you'll just get organically from people coming across your game and then wish listing it. So what I'm talking about here is like I've seen as low as 2 wish lists per day and as high as 200 wish lists per day, and I'm sure there's other games that are doing 500 wish lists a day. This is when literally nothing is happening. Maybe it's 6 weeks after you've announced the game, there's no story beats, there's no announcements. And I think that gives you a really good idea of the natural discovery of your game. And I think that is a bit of a fixed number. I think you can juice it a little bit, but some games are more discoverable than others. So that's why you really need to think about that. And I've certainly looked at some of these ways you can get your wish list juiced by festivals, for example. Well, maybe Steam festivals are okay, Steam Next Fest, but let's say the virtual events for real life events like a Gamescom sale or a pack sale, I think they're worth doing. But I've for a client, I've done some mapping of Discord server joins to Steam wishlist additions. And I did discover that in some of these places where you get a lot of wish lists, you don't have many people joining the Discord server at the same time. It doesn't track very well. Whereas I think from streamers, you do. And so that does lead me to believe that you have to think about your wish list quality. I think a lot of people get very disappointed on launch, say, well, I had 20,000 wish lists. But then when you ask what percentage of those wish lists are from those type of pre-release promotions, so if it's very high and then their organic wishlist additions are quite low, then that may be a hint that your performance might be on the lower end of the average. But you shouldn't not add those wish lists. You should just bear this in mind. Next, I think a surprisingly large amount of games are popular due to this. And I played this game, and now I want more games like it. And I feel like this is almost like a dirty secret, like I said, because I feel like people don't always A, want to admit that, or B, they don't want to always think about it because they want their game to be original, or they don't want to feel like they're riding on the coattails of another title. But I do think that this is really worth thinking about. Games are often finite in length. People get tired of them, and then people really enjoy games that are twists or returns of concepts they loved in the past. So I think a great example is Cities Skylines has ended up being a massive hit. And it's definitely a very SimCity inspired game. It's a very vanilla city builder. There just weren't really any good quality vanilla current day city builders on Steam when it came out, or on console, and I think that really played to its advantage. And the same maybe with Temtem, has a lot of Pokemon mechanics in it. At one point, there were very few Pokemon-style games available outside of Nintendo platforms. Stardew Valley, obviously, Harvest Moon with Minecraft-like crafting, but Stardew Valley is also a great example of a game that really filled a niche where people, maybe not everyone who's played Stardew Valley played Harvest Moon, but I feel like that style of game was missing from the market. And actually, Chris Zukowski from howtomarketagame.com, which I recommend you check out, did some video tracking of Steam players and buyers with their permission. And he saw a lot of this kind of game hopping, like, I like X. And look, this game looks visually a bit like X, so maybe I should wishlist it. So I think this is very valid and something to think about. I think the difficult bit is working out which game types actually have people waiting to play them. And I think it can be a little bit dangerous sometimes, because you can see some genres and you see some really top games in it, but actually there's a lot of people crowding into that genre. Like Metroidvanias is a good example. Like, I think Metroidvanias, which are really, platformy, puzzly kind of games, a la Metroid, I think they do have some standouts that have sold a lot of copies, but I think there's also, because there's quite a low barrier to entry for that style of game, there's a lot of games coming in and trying to emulate that. So maybe, although you might be like, well, everyone's finished the latest hot Metroidvania and they want to play another one, how many other people are trying to do that at the same time? So I'm on the extreme end of this view on paid ads, but from the history we've had with No More Robots, we've had over $10 million gross lifetime revenue, and I think we've had about $5,000 of paid player acquisition in there. So that is an example of a publisher who's managed to make it work. And one of the reasons that I'm not a massive fan of paid ads, especially for Steam and console, is that you can't really track clearly to ROI. You can't pixel track on Steam, as you may know. So you can track people who've clicked on an ad and gone to your page, but that's really as far as you can go. So the question is, how is stuff really converting? I have spoken to some people more recently who have more expensive games. I think if you have a $30 or $40 game, then you probably have more chance of coming out ahead on this. But I definitely know people who've done large spends after launch in quiet times and haven't really seen much revenue uptick. And I've also, known folks who've done spends during sales or launches. There's obviously a lot of natural revenue in there anyway, especially when you have your first sale on Steam and lots of wishlist emails are sent out. So I think it's kind of really difficult to guesstimate the actual return, and I think often you're sort of topping out at like 50% of your spend, which is okay, but not amazing. But that's just incredibly difficult to prove. I've sort of looked at some data and I can't really prove it. So for me, the only argument in favor of paid ads is I do think having some paid ads around launch for profile reasons is good. And it might rise the profile for organic streaming and just sort of reminds people that it exists. But it's an interesting question. I know that paid ads are built heavily into a lot of marketing budgets because historically that's always been done that way. I'm not always convinced that that's a good use of money nowadays. I think maybe publishers should spend the money on getting more organic streamers by having a better network with them or things like that. So media and versus streamers. I myself, as I said, was editor-in-chief of Gamesexperte and Game Developer magazine, so I'm obviously a fan of the traditional media. But certainly if you track sales or wishlist spikes that I've seen based on who's covered things, social media is a kind of a small blip generally. Big websites mentioning games lead to small increases most of the time. I'm sure there's some local differences. I'm sure there's some German outlets that make a difference, and certainly in the English media, sites like Rock Paper Shotgun do seem to make a difference. But in general, streamers time and time again see bigger boosts when they feature you, especially YouTubers. And I still feel like traditional PR emphasizes websites, blog hits at the expense of streamers, partly because it's a different transaction. But I think this needs to shift more. So again, I recommend that people spend a lot more time on streamer outreach. There's just an impossibly large amount of streamers out there. And if you've got your game right, then then the streamers really want to try it. And you can often get, you know, a streamer that doesn't speak your language, maybe a streamer from Brazil who has 500,000 YouTube subscribers. They can give you good spikes of interest, and they're not people that you would necessarily think about reaching out to otherwise. So put the good stuff up front. Lots of people are keen to gradually reveal information on your game, kind of keep people guessing, tease out information. I was chatting to someone recently who had a game where they were really holding back a lot of the good stuff, and they were like, well, we want the fans to kind of go along with this. And I really don't think this makes sense nowadays. I think you can hold a few things back, like maybe you have extra DLC or characters. I think that's great to hold that back for partway through the process. But I really think you should debut your game, like announce your game with a trailer that has gameplay in it and a clear idea of the game's full scope, as close to the final pitch as possible. And you should put all that on the game's Steam page, on your website, on your console pages for the game. And if you were to ask me why this is, I think it's tempting to think of your fans as a certain amount of people who will keep checking in. And obviously you have those hardcore fans who will do that. But many people are not checking back. They will just stumble upon your game once. They will check out any information that's available to it. And but if they don't have, if there's no video, if there's no detailed information, then they're probably not going to come back. So I think if you only have partial information or you're trying to tease something, you're generally not putting your best foot forward unless you're teasing something from a giant game franchise that everyone is already excited about. These rules obviously don't apply to the next Halo game. But I think most of us are not marketing or trying to get discovery for that. So I think you do need to think about these things quite differently. So post-release, I do think there's one post-release marketing tool you should rely on quite a lot, and I do think that's sales, which is to say discounts. And I know you might be like, well, you know, my game stands on its own. Why am I going to be so obsessed with discounts? But I've actually found that that it's really important to have someone in your organization or in your publisher's organization who really cares about this and is doing it in a very scientific way, because you can miss out on a lot of revenue. And it's definitely my view that you shouldn't discount a lot percentage-wise, but you should really discount with maximum frequency. Like every time your game is available to go on sale, if at all possible, you should discount it. And the reason for that is that it really drives probably 5 times as much revenue and 7 times as much sales every time you discount. And you don't necessarily always reach the same people. There's many people who will get Steam wishlist notices from multiple games at the same time, so they won't check out yours, or they don't check all their emails, or they get to see it on a discount site. So you're catching a different set of people every time. And discounting actually can drive the majority of sales. So I definitely think there's people who are leaving hundreds of thousands of euros on the table every year just because they're not aggressive enough with their discounting. And I don't think you should immediately go to 50%, but I think the first sale for your game after launching on Steam should be 20% off. And I actually think you should be discounting every 6 to 8 weeks at 20% off from then onwards. Sometimes if you have a large portfolio as a publisher, you may have to spread it out a little bit and have your certain amounts of your games discounted at the same time, because you clearly don't want to be in a situation where you have to discount a game every day. It gets really complicated. I also think that you don't have to actually put marketing heft behind each of these discounts, because you obviously think people are a little bit sensitive, like, does it look like I'm discounting my game too much? And I think my answer is people don't notice. But let's say someone is reading your Twitter page all the time and they notice. I don't think you have to make a big blast about it multiple times every time your game is on sale. I think it's good sort of to decouple traditional marketing from discount management and sort of treat them independently, I think is my point. So I've already played up streamers, and this is sort of more of my extension about finding streamers who are right for the game based on other things they stream. I think there are, obviously you may know there's existing sites that help you with matching streamers. There's sites like Woovit or Keymailer. I think those sites are useful, and I think those sites will get you kind of small and medium level streamers you might not be aware of. But I do think that they've become a little transactional, and many of the best streamers don't use them to get keys. Some do. So I would definitely say you can use sites like Woovit or Keymailer to get streamers to play your game, but also do a lot of custom research. There are sites out there where you can see who has streamed particular games, and although it's kind of manual work from you or your PR company, whoever makes sense, you should reach out to these people personally with keys to your game. And I really think that's a great way to get interest, because the streamers are continually changing what they play. If you can find good variety streamers, I think people are always very excited to be given keys, and I do think if you can build up interest there, that's a really good way to go. I think some games are inherently streamable or less streamable, but ultimately you need to think about this quite a lot, and I think you need to spend more time finding them with old-fashioned legwork. I think that can really pay dividends. So I recently had a whole column on my GameDiscoverCo newsletter about this, but I want to rehash it a little bit. I think there's been a big resurgence in game demos recently before release, but I feel like everyone is a little bit confused about if they work or not. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when demos used to be really important, like I think on Xbox Live Arcade, I think all games came with demos early on. And I think demos can be helpful, but I think they're sometimes more of a predictor in how well your game is actually going to do, rather than a sort of the thing that made your game popular, if you see what I mean. It's sort of a correlation causation issue. And so I think sometimes your demo or Steam prologue, Steam standalone prologue, will do well if the full game is going to do well, and it will do less well if the full game is not going to do well. But having said that, there's clearly examples when people pick up your demo, really love it, and it really helps buzz. I think Loop Hero, which came out recently on Steam, is a good example. The demo for Loop Hero went down really well in I think the Steam Festival, and that really helped its launch. So I'm definitely a fan of kind of having limited time demos. I don't think having a demo on your page all the time is necessarily that positive. And I think, but I do think, doing one for a Steam Festival is good. I think doing console demos is okay, but not quite so helpful. But I do think you need to think very carefully about how your demo plays. And I do see a lot of people kind of either giving away too much in demos, or maybe their game is kind of casual to start with. So they end up getting a lot of interest from their demo. But actually, it's people who are playing it more casually, and there's not a lot more that means they're going to buy the full game. Finally, here's a couple of things to think about when you're managing player interest. I think most of the time in games, you have a hype issue, which is to say, people aren't excited enough about your game. You need to make them more excited. And that's the most obvious thing, and most of you will have that problem. But as you get closer to release, sometimes you've sort of done a good job of selling people. Like maybe your hype is good, but what is your hype based on? And I think that's when expectation management comes in, and managing people's expectations is really important because they're expecting to play a certain kind of game. They haven't played it yet. And so if you haven't done a good job of explaining to them what the game is with all the pre-release information, or maybe your game doesn't look like it plays, then you can run into some rough seas when you launch the game, because people are like, well, this game looked like a colony sim, but actually it's a idle game where you can't control anything. I don't know if anyone's done that. That would not be a great idea. I've certainly seen this a little bit in like there's some platform games where you don't directly control the player occasionally. So there's some weird stuff like that doesn't quite look the same as doesn't quite play the same as it looks. And actually, a practical example that I've given recently is the No More Robots published game, Yes, Your Grace, had a little bit of this because it's a kingdom simulator game. And if you look at all the pre-release information, you know, it looks quite strategy-led. It has a bunch of attributes. It's got a map. And so I think some people were expecting it to be like a Crusader Kings style, super wide, you can do anything kind of game, but it's actually more of a sort of visual novel with strategy elements. It's not completely linear, but it's certainly not as wide open as some people thought. Now, as it happens, the game is really good and the story is really good. So you'll see, I think maybe the game has 10%, maybe 10% negative reviews on Steam because of that expectation management problem. But ultimately, it's still got very positive reviews and it's done really well. And people really like it. So that was an example of a expectation management problem that was sort of, I think it was ended up being a net positive because some people were excited about that game because of those things. And although those elements were not quite as well heavily integrated as some people thought, they still really liked the game. So it's a little bit tricky because obviously, you know, the example recently, Cyberpunk, I wrote a column on this recently. Clearly, Cyberpunk got a long way over their skis on this problem where there was a lot of expectation management problems based on some pseudo gameplay footage that they put in fairly early on that didn't translate super well to how the game ended up, at least not on current gen consoles. So I think that's just a thought, like, you know, what do you put out to get people excited, and how do you manage their expectations after you get them excited is important, I think. So I just wanted to end off by talking about some key game discovery data sources. I think being data-driven with this stuff is important. And Steam is the place where you get a lot of the information because Steam is by far the most transparent platform. I recommend SteamDB, which is steamdb.info, over SteamSpy. I mean, SteamSpy is fine and used to be the kind of market leader, but it's run by someone who's worked at Epic Game Store for a long time now, and so it's not really being updated, whereas SteamDB is updated quite extensively. And I think, you know, particular things to look at here is kind of monthly concurrent users, owner estimates, streaming spikes. It does have some information on which streamers are picking up games, although other sites are better at tracking streaming, like Sully Gnome for Twitch. And then it also has follower trending, and I'm a big fan of follower trending. Just for everyone's information, you know, the followers are when people choose to follow news about your game on Steam, but it's not a wish list. It's kind of different, and it's a little bit of a hidden stat on Steam. It's not in most of the Steam backends, but SteamDB captures follower information for all games for the last 18 months, so you can really see how quickly games are adding followers. And roughly speaking, I think it's like 9 or 10 wish lists for every follower. So you can even make a vague estimate about how many wish lists a game has based on that. So I think that's really good, and SteamDB has that information, so I definitely recommend checking it out, and the site's free. Another site called Gamesexperte, which is a little bit more obscure. It has a bit of a generic name, but actually has some really good stuff. It has some subscriber-only stats, but it's only $10 or $20 a month to sign up. But it's got a lot of free stuff, and it's particularly good for Steam tag browsing. So obviously, Steam tags, as you folks may know, are the kind of genre tags that are applied to games by players, but also you as a developer can change them. So you can change the order of them. You should always make sure that your most specific subgenres are at the very top of your Steam tag list. in the screenshot here, the tags are just sorted alphabetically because that's how they show it. But there is an order on Steam, and so so with the site, I think especially when you when you sign up for subscription, you can see average and median revenues for each tag, which is really helpful. But in general, you can for free, you can check out all of this information, so you can sort of see like what's got the most estimated net revenue in a particular area. But I think, I've talked about this a little bit. Median and average, and especially median tag revenue is important, because you'll find that some genres have just much higher than others. Like I think City Builder is more like $15,000 median revenue. Obviously, you don't want to make $15,000 with your game, but this includes a lot of kind of cheap, non-professionally made games. So, I've tended to find that the median in many cases for an average game is like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for that particular tag. So you can really find particular tags that have really good median revenues, and that may give you a hint as to whether that genre or subgenre is a good one to enter. But this is all kind of inexact, and don't forget that all games have a bunch of tags and they interact with each other. So you might be picking the most exciting tag, but maybe it also has some tags that have worse median revenue. But it'll give you some idea. And I definitely recommend also going to Steam itself and sort by latest release in that tag. So Steam has tag pages, for whatever it's with, I think fighting, right? 2D Fighter. So you can go to the Steam tag page for 2D Fighter and then look at the latest releases, and then just mouse down and sort of see how many reviews they have and how much they cost. And I think I've been doing that recently, and that's really helped me. Like, how many games in this tag have come out in the last 3 months that cost $15 or more, and how many reviews do they actually have? I think that's a really good indication for you about whether people are interested in this kind of area. So again, a more data-driven approach to picking genres or styles is important. Another site, there's quite a lot of these sites that exist and use Steam data, because Steam's very open with their data. This site, steam250.com. I don't know if anyone remembers Elastomania, by the way. I used to play this game a lot, like 15 or 20 years ago or more. But anyhow, so basically Steam's Club 250, it has some of the same stuff that SteamDB has, but it's a bit more review focused. It's started to add other things now, and it has a section called Club 250 for all the games now, and they've actually integrated net and gross revenue estimates, and I think it's still trending a little bit high, but I think if you look on the internet, like how much did this game actually make? At this point, steam250.com, because it's using a bunch of my research and then doing some stuff on top of it, is probably the most accurate gross and net revenue calculator if you want to see how other games did on Steam. However, just be aware, all of those calculations are based on number of reviews, which can change by a factor of 3. So it's still within a factor of like $2 million to $6 million. So you can never be very exact with this stuff, and I think it's good to be honest about that. But I think you do need to work out what stuff is indicative. And then finally, there's my there's my hype charts, and these are charts that are generated as part of my newsletter subscription. Actually, I recently changed my URL, but this URL works as well. So it's also at newsletter.gamediscover.co, but this URL works as well. And basically, in addition to, I have a free newsletter which is at gamediscover.co, but there's a paid element to it, which is about like $12 a month if you sign up for a year. And what we ended up doing, I worked with this guy called Lars Doucette, who used to work actually at Steam. He was a contractor and worked on some of their features. And so what we're doing is we're scraping the full Steam database every day of like 5,000 unreleased games, and we're ranking them. And we're ranking them based on, we have an arbitrary points system, but we're ranking them based on things like how many followers they have, and where they are in the top unreleased game wish lists, and track record of the publisher. And Steam Chatter is the amount of threads on the Steam forums extrapolated to a number. So it actually means that we're able to see, when games are unreleased, it's not necessarily, we can't say how many copies they're going to sell, but we're able to see the relative interest in games, and we're finding this pretty helpful, because often you'll see games and people are like, what, this game came out of nowhere, I can't believe it was a hit. Well, most of the time actually there is some indication it's doing well, and we're, like this game that's on this list, number 11, Carlson. I'm guessing that many of you have not heard of Carlson. It's actually a game, a kind of physicsy game made by a very popular YouTuber, and it has 65,000 Steam followers, which is probably over 500,000 wish lists. So that's kind of crazy, but it definitely exists. And I think if you're able to get more information into these kind of games that are doing well, then it really helps your strategy, because you can look at what genres they're in and so on. But even if you're not using my compiled version of the chart, you can look at stuff like Steam followers, and you can look at the top wishlist page. There's a top unreleased wishlist page on Steam that you can just access anyway, and you can sort of do your own version of this. Yeah, and there we are. I think that's the meat of the presentation, and I'm happy to take further questions on some of the things I suggest here. There's kind of console stuff, mobile, publisher, or other granular questions. Okay, first question. As a non-established company without other titles, how do you recommend announcing your title if not paid ads? Yeah, so I think you want to announce your title with a trailer. You want to try and make a big deal about it. You want to send it to all the news outlets. You really want to try and think about what's hooky or exciting in your trailer. Like, obviously Rock Paper Shotgun gets a lot of announcements. Why would Rock Paper Shotgun run the announcement of your game? So that's very much down to the kind of hook. And and then if you can find an outlet who's willing to run it like more exclusively or something, then that's great. But I definitely think like paid ads around launch, I think, but certainly for announcing things, I think it's better to do a more organic announcement, and I think it's better to really concentrate on hook and really try and blast it hard via social media and get journalists interested. Obviously, you can't get streamers at announce generally, because streamers don't cover announces, but you can at least get traditional media interested. You mentioned advertising how much content a game has in hook. What about short linear games? If my playtime is 1 to 3 hours, I can't really build my hook on how much playtime customers will get out of it. Yes. Interesting problem. So I actually literally, my last newsletter, if you go to newsletter.gamediscover.co, is about this exact issue. Like most of my advice nowadays, unfortunately for people who are making short narrative games, is make long replayable games with random stuff in them, because obviously if you're not doing that already, then that may not be helpful advice wise. But I think if you are doing that, what I said in my latest newsletter is that it is about word of mouth, and it's also about having really impressive, I think you have visually impressive, trailers. And then if you can get people hooked maybe on the visuals and the kind of look and feel, and then you can get enough word of mouth after launch, then if you have 90% positive Steam reviews, then people are going to keep recommending it to people, and you will keep doing well. But to your point, if your game is a shorter but beautiful one-off game, then I think you do just have to be honest about that and sort of pitch it as that. And obviously you run into some issues around cost then, because some Steam players are like, well, this is €7 an hour. I don't want to spend €7 an hour. But I think if you can try and steer people away from that and get them more interested in the fact it's a really great, artistically interesting game, then you can hopefully get a slow build over time. But I would say those shorter kind of narrative-led games, linear games, often have a slower start. Just be prepared for a slower start and kind of hopefully a longer tail. From what angle do you think you should attempt streamers YouTubers? Anything important you should take care of? Yeah, so sending them personalized notes I think is important. Like I think you should say, oh, I checked out your channel and I saw you played X. here's a game you might like because of that. I've also seen there's some people with advice on this, like definitely just send them a Steam key. I've heard some people note that like sometimes people trying to get into back and forth and they say, would you like a Steam key? So no, you should only send one email to all these folks, and you should just give them all the information, send them a key to the game or a preview of the game, and just go from there. Obviously, if you're trying to get them to do an exclusive preview, or you have to send them like a timed thing because the game isn't out yet, then maybe it's different. But try and make it as short and helpful and transactional as possible, I think is the point. And then just do a lot of research into the kind of streamers who might make your games. I think who might like your games. I think there's less point, like, don't just get a list of the top 20 YouTubers and send them an email, because if you look at some of these YouTubers, a lot of them just play Fortnite all the time forever, and so they're never going to cover your game. So I think you have to be realistic about the kind of streamers and YouTubers who actually play other styles of games and are going to be interested in it. Talking about wish lists, what exactly is the goal? Make games in genres that have much demand, or wait to publish at a peak interest in your niche? That's an interesting question. I think, like, I've largely tried, I am at some point, I think, now that I have this data, I'm going to start looking at, to your point, interest over time in certain genres, because I'm working with a publisher who's very interested in this. And so it's certainly true that over a period of maybe 1 or 2 or 3 years, certain genres become hot and certain genres don't. And so maybe you can try and time that. You can be like, what genre is going to be hot in 2 years' time? But I think in general, the bigger issue right now is that people aren't aware how much better colony simulators do on Steam than puzzle platformers. And I think it genuinely does make a big difference. So I think, certainly building up wish lists, you're going to have a better time of it if you're in a genre that just does better overall. So I would say that's just making games in genres that have high demand, but also a low amount of games in them. Because like, you can argue that puzzle platformers have high demand because some puzzle platformers have made $50 million, but there sure are a lot of people making puzzle platformers. I don't think it's generally a very easy genre to do well in. So I guess the way to publish at a peak interest is an interesting idea, but I think because it takes such a long time to make games, I think it's very difficult to do that. So I think you should just try to pick what looks good now, and hopefully won't be overloaded in a couple of years' time when you finish your game. And you should particularly look at things that take a little more time to make. I think the danger is, if it is a hot genre, but it's quite easy to make the game, well, a lot of other people will have made it by 2 years' time. So maybe that's a good thing to think about. How do you best utilize the "I played this game and now I want more games like it" factor? So far, it's inspired by the Gothic and the Witcher games factor is definitely working for us. I wonder if there's more we can do in this regard. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I do think it's based on hook. A good example is, I've forgotten the name of the game, but there's a Dark Souls style game that just sold 500,000 copies, where it was very clearly like, if you like Dark Souls, you'll like this style of game, and people just naturally gravitate towards that. So there is some question in your marketing whether you should sort of explicitly say, inspired by games like Gothic. And I think you're not allowed. Someone told me you're not allowed to do that on your Steam page, but certainly when you're talking kind of off the record to maybe press or streamers, I think it's very reasonable to say, hey, maybe you like Gothic style games. Here's, our game certainly takes some ideas from that kind of genre. So I think it's okay to mention that kind of stuff sort of semi-publicly, but I think, certainly saying publicly, if you like The Witcher, you'll like our game, probably, you're right, it's a bit much. So yeah, I think the answer is, if it's working, then it's working because you already made the right decision, but maybe you can push it a little bit more kind of semi-publicly. Does successful streamers also influence short linear games? If the game is only 1 to 2 hours, streamers might play in one setting, showing all the content. It might discourage viewers buying the game to play it themselves? Yeah, this is a good question on streamers, and it is true that like narrative games can be a double-edged sword there. What I'd actually say is that I don't see that many. I'm not sure this is good for you, but I don't see that many streamers playing short linear narrative games, honestly. So it's not always a problem that you're going to run into. And when they do, they'll often play like half-hour snippets of them, or as a kind of a variety thing. So I definitely think, like I'm definitely not of this kind of school that like you shouldn't send stuff out, or you should try and forbid people from doing YouTube videos because they'll spoil the whole game. I think all publicity is good publicity, and if people like the look of it, then they'll probably try and play it. But in general, a lot of the time you'll see streamers honestly playing replayable games that have random factors in them, because that's really entertaining. And I think I don't think you should over cater to streamers, but thinking about what's entertaining for a streamer is actually quite important nowadays. Things that are entertaining for streamers include short playtime on games, different every time. Unexpected stuff happens. So whereas, you know, if you make a game that has like 3-hour playthroughs, but it's a roguelike, then the streamer's kind of grinding through it, and the audience is going to get bored. So, you know, I don't think you should over cater your game to YouTubers or streamers, but I do think you should think about that. What if I develop a narrative game with lots of text and not much flashy design, like Lifeline? Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. I think, you know, ultimately, it may limit your appeal to streamers, but there's still plenty of traditional media who'll pick up on that. Maybe, you know, there's maybe awards folks. It's just a question of how you get the word out, I think. And obviously, if it's not so flashy, it's a little bit more difficult, but it's still good. Oh yeah, how do I know I'm niche? I think this is related to when I was sort of saying the niche, the niche genre kind of thing. Well, one thing I would do is look at the. I'll see if I can find the thing. But there's a. I know I'm talking about that thing where you can look at the list of genres and which of them made the most money. Here we are. Unfortunately, you have to pay for that on GameStats, but Danny Weinbaum did a free version on Gamesexperte a while ago that I just put in chat. And so if you look at that, that's like a really big Google Doc. You can actually see, and you can sort it by average revenue. So you can sort of see which theme tags are the most kind of popular niches. So, you know, and right at the top, you'll see really silly stuff like Warhammer. And obviously you can't make a Warhammer game, but just ignore the stuff that's like silly, and you'll see other helpful stuff about the best niches to be. How does it affect your hook if you genre mash 3 or more genres in a game? Yeah, I think you can get a little bit confusing sometimes. One comment I had on that is the Empire of Sin that just came out. It hasn't had the best reviews, and I think one comment people have had about it is it does have too many game styles in one. It sort of has some combat and some overall strategy and some other stuff as well. So I think it can get confusing to people, but I think it's okay as long as you can explain it, and you can and it actually and as long as it reads well visually. So I don't think it's necessarily bad. Would it be a disadvantage when you want to work with a publisher? Yeah. So the pros and cons of publishers is very interesting, and I have a running joke about publishers right now. Apologies for any publishers on the call, which is, you know, when you're a developer and your game hasn't done well with the publisher, then you're kind of like, well, what did the publisher do for me? And when you're a developer and your game did really well with a publisher, then you're like, well, why are they still taking 40% from me and they're not doing anything? So, you know, so I actually think that the publishers can be a significant net advantage nowadays, particularly because of their obviously their reach, but also because of their platform connection. So now, if you want to be on Xbox Game Pass, for example, it's way easier to get on if you're a publisher than if you're an individual game trying to negotiate with Xbox, because Xbox just has they don't have a certain amount of time to deal with everybody, and so they're tending to deal with, but not always, but they tend to deal with people they already know. So I think that's the advantage. I think the disadvantage is the biggest disadvantage, frankly, is if you can fund your game to completion yourself, are you just paying the publisher 30 or 40 or even 50% of your revenue for no reason, because your game would have been just as successful anyway? And I think that's the really, really interesting question. If you need a publisher because you can't finish your game without their money, then obviously you will need to do that and take terms and conditions and all the upsides. But if you're thinking about self-publishing, it is an interesting question. Like, I definitely think there's been some games who've signed with publishers who would have done just as well if they hadn't had a publisher, because the game was just really good or really hooky. So I think that's definitely a potential disadvantage. And then I think another potential disadvantage with publishers is, sometimes they will spend money on things that you may or may not agree with, and then that sort of comes out of the royalties, if you will. So certainly, external marketing or being at shows or things like that. I think there's all kinds of things around contracts that you have to look at there, and certainly who owns the IP and all that type of stuff. So so I think so I think the advantages are obvious with publishers. They'll give you a boost, they'll give you money. I think the disadvantages are like, are they just going to sign you, sort of sit on the game in your opinion, and then you don't really do that much better anyway? Like, you sort of need to have a trust set up there that they're really, really going to spend time on it and really work on making it successful as well. From publisher's point of view, who is making a big chunk of their overall revenue on Steam? Do you think it's worth trying out for Epic releases just for splitting the risk, or do you think Epic will be playing a whole different role in the future? Yeah, so on Epic, obviously, for a long time, Epic has been running on a sort of different model, which is they only released, the Epic Game Store only released a few games, and they were generally paying up front for them, and they were paying you a minimum guarantee quite often. So you'd be like, as if you'd sold 50,000 copies of the game or whatever. So it was quite a good deal, and then you could go on Steam a year later. But in the last 2 or 3 months, and even very recently, Epic is opening up now. So it's becoming much easier to get on Epic Game Store at the same time you launch on Steam. And I think that's really changing things, because now there's going to be a lot more games on Epic Game Store. And personally, I know that Epic has put out some impressive numbers for Epic Game Store in terms of unique users, but I think they are having the same problem that everyone else is having on PC, which is that Steam is just the overall leader and everyone just wants to buy their games on Steam. So I don't see an average game making more than 10% of its revenue on the Epic Store if it's on Steam and Epic at the same time. And obviously that's also true for games like for places like GOG.com. So really, Steam, whether we like it or not, it tends to be 90% of PC revenue, no matter what happens, I think. And we'll see what happens in the future. Maybe Game Pass, which is now obviously on PC, maybe Game Pass is going to disrupt that a little bit, at least for subscription revenue, because a lot of people are going to be using Game Pass things. But in the short term, it's really, I think the Epic Game Store is a nice. My view is that if you should do it if you can, because it's a nice amount of extra revenue, but I don't think it's a game changer. Do you know a publisher would support publishing a mobile game like a reinvented missile command game? Honestly, mobile publishers, not really my area, but just to comment on mobile publishers, there aren't really that many mobile publishers who don't do free-to-play stuff anymore. And for the free-to-play guys, as I understand it, you have to either finish the game, or for hyper casual, you just sort of have to you just have to soft launch the game with them and see if it does well, and they don't pay you up front. So it's a bit of a weird model. But if you think your game could work as a hyper casual game, then certainly go Google all the hyper casual game publisher names and try and pitch them. What do you think about small platforms like itch.io? Should we focus on one platform or select a few? Yeah, so Itch, I actually love Itch. If people haven't seen itch.io, it's a really, really great platform. It's very egalitarian. You can choose what percentage to give people, but certainly based on my direct experience, it's really a very marginal amount of extra revenue if you have the game on Steam as well. So I think it's the kind of thing where if you want to support them, you should absolutely do it. And I'm not saying don't be on Itch, because I think they play an important role. But I think if you're spending a lot of time updating the game for like 73 platforms every time you update, then that's the point where you have to ask yourself, is that a good use of your time? So honestly, on PC, if you're just being ruthless about your time, I would recommend being on Steam and Epic and maybe GOG, and that's sort of it. And then obviously on console, I would recommend always being on Switch and probably being on Xbox and PlayStation if it's easy or if it's that right type of game. Yeah, but that's sort of where we are nowadays. Yeah, so console versus Steam. Well, firstly, on the revenue side, it's a little bit tricky, but most of the time, Steam is going to be the highest revenue for your game, and console is going to be a little bit lower. I've sort of done some kind of, obviously, a lot of console revenue stuff is NDA'd, and I obviously know console stuff from my work that I can't really talk about, but I did ask more publicly for people to give me anonymized Steam versus console data at one point for the kind of first week of release. And as I recall, it was kind of like Steam, 55% of all my revenue, Switch, 35% of my revenue, and then PlayStation, Xbox were like 10% each or something. Well, that doesn't quite add up to 100, but you get the idea. But that's obviously based on a hideously subjective, very small amount of things. I've spoken to people about this recently, and they say that some games magically do better on Xbox, some magically do better on PlayStation. A lot of it is down to whether you're being featured or not. My only comment on console is that Switch used to be really good because Switch, there weren't very many games. There were a lot of really excited players, and so you could regularly sell much better on Steam on Switch if you had the right type of game. But now you're seeing, I think, 35 plus releases a week on Switch. So Switch got pretty busy, and obviously there's been a lot of discounting, extreme discounting. Switch even kind of cut down on that a little bit. So it's not quite as easy to extreme discount as you used to. So I definitely think that Switch isn't quite as good as it used to be, but it's still useful incremental money. But I do think on Switch in particular, there's less tactics compared to Steam. I was talking to someone who has made a lot of Steam games, has bringing them to Switch, and on Steam he's doing a lot with kind of wish lists and promotions and that type of stuff. And on Switch, it's pretty locked down. You're kind of releasing your game. You're trying to get like Nintendo Life and Nintendo websites to cover it. But there's, and more general PR. But there's much less you can do, compared to Steam. You've just sort of got to pitch it to the right people, make sure it's the right style of game for Switch, and sort of have it happen, I guess. So that's obviously I could go on about console versus Steam for a long time, and there are some games that do just as well on Steam and console. They're a smash hit on everything, but that's quite difficult to get right.
Dear Simon, people are all excited with all these wonderful questions. Thank you very much for your insights. I'm sorry if we missed maybe one or two last questions, but I think you could go on forever with these very interesting questions and also your answers. And for me personally, I think I'm glad to hear that a couple of the offerings that we developed here from the Medien.NRW are also contributing to the visibility and maybe discoverability in your estimation. For example, we developed something called Indie Zone NRW, a Twitch format where developers can play, and there's a moderator, a host called Marcy, and they interact and they can explain their game. And maybe for those who are interested, we're also launching paid ads soon, promoting upcoming releases from games developed in NRW. So in any case, anybody's interested, watch our newsletter and our website.